Hello, my name is Tom Krickenberger. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that I organized the main points of the speech which I'm about to deliver to you? Well, considering that we're all in the same class and doing the same assignment, I imagine that you do. And guess what? Surprise, surprise! I'm going to be speaking about the various organizational patterns we have for organizing the main points of our speeches. Let's start with the topical pattern, which is the pattern I use for organizing the main points of this speech. In the topical pattern, you have a subject that can easily be divided into subdivisions. In this case, the organizational patterns for organizing your main points. The next pattern we would look at is the temporal pattern. This is a useful pattern, again, for informational speeches, for describing events or processes that occur over time. If you're going to give a speech describing the evolution of democracy, you might well choose the temporal pattern. The third pattern we will look at is the spatial pattern. This is good for informational speeches describing places or objects from inside out, from left to right, from back to front, what have you. If you're giving a speech describing Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, you might well use the spatial pattern, starting from downtown, going through Hollywood, through Brentwood, through Beverly Hills, through Westwood, and finally to Santa Monica. The spatial pattern. The next main pattern we will look at is the problem-solution pattern. As the name implies, you will divide the main points of your speech into those describing a problem and those describing a solution to a problem. An example of this would be if you considered it a problem that former Vice President Dick Cheney is still a free man, and your solution was starting a grassroots campaign to have him prosecuted for treason. The speeches you gave on that campaign you might well organize according to the problem-solution pattern. The next main pattern we have is a cause and effect. There are two things. One is a cause and it causes an effect. An example of this would be if you're giving a speech linking together the effects between teenage drinking and teenage pregnancy. The last main pattern that we will look at is known as the motivated sequence. The motivated sequence can be used for both informational and persuasive speeches, and is especially useful for motivating an audience to act. With the motivated sequence, you will first gain the audience's attention, you will identify a need, then you will show how that need can be satisfied, invite the audience to imagine the need being satisfied, and lastly, encourage the audience to act. An example of that would be showing all of you how important it is for us to be effective public speakers, demonstrating how we can use the techniques we've been learning in this course to become effective public speakers, encouraging you to imagine yourself being an excellent public speaker using these techniques, and lastly, urging you to use these techniques. Now, these are only the main organizational patterns: topical, temporal, spatial, problem, solution, cause, effect, and motivated sequence. There are others you might want to consider depending upon your exact speech and purpose. Now, here's a quick overview of some of these other patterns and examples of when you might use them. We have the structure function. Photovoltaic cells, how do they work? We have comparison and contrast. Banks versus credit unions. Pro and con. Legalizing marijuana. Arguments for, arguments against. Claim and proof. The Electoral College is obsolete, and here's why. Next, we would have the multiple definition, which is used to explain the nature of a concept. For instance, if I was going to give a speech on unilateralism, I might well use the multiple definition. The key word being multiple definition. That we also have then pattern known as who, what, who, what, where, and why, when, and how. It's a pattern that journalists use when they write. It's a pattern you might pattern a speech on if you're going to speak about the recent events concerning Bubble Boy. The last one we'll cover here is the fiction fact pattern. Yeti, truth or fiction? There are pictures, are they real? Now, some of these patterns are more effective than others for informational speeches, while others are best suited for persuasive speeches. As you look at the different patterns, you'll see that depending on your particular speech, it is very important for you to choose the right one. For instance, you wouldn't choose a cause-effect pattern when speaking at a funeral. Now, obviously, time constraints have made it impossible to get into much detail about these particular patterns. But you do now know that there are various patterns available for you to organize the main points of your speech, and you know how important it is for you to choose the right one. Your audience might not appreciate the fine points of your organization, but they will always know if you're not prepared. So, prepare and be organized. Thank you for your time.